Welcome to Conversaciones with Biblioteca Digital Pitts. In this series, we explore the mission of the library of fostering academic, theological, digital, and cultural literacies in ministerial and theological education. We hope to provide you with a space to reflect on questions and ideas that will inspire your work in education and ministry. In this episode, we discuss the vital topic of integrating cultural literacy to our ministerial formation and theological education. While some may think that Latinos are one big family, we trace our ancestries to over 26 cultures in Latin America. This means sometimes we struggle to find common ground with others. Cultural literacy not only enhances our ability to communicate and connect with people from different backgrounds, but also enriches our own perspectives and approaches to ministry. Becoming one in the Lord requires a willingness to learn from each other. And today, we are joined by two wonderful educators who understand the complexities of ministering in culturally diverse contexts. Both personally have experienced the challenges of navigating between cultures, languages, and identity. This has informed their commitment to evangelization and mission both in the U.S. and Latin America. Dr. Ruth Padilla DeBorst is Associate Professor of World Christianity at Western Theological Seminary, while also serving with the Comunidad de Estudios Teológicos Interdisciplinarios, CETI, and the networking team of International Fellowship Formation and Transformation, INFEMIT. Dr. Padilla and her husband James currently live in Casa Adobe in Costa Rica, an international community that seeks to promote Christian communion and peace with creation. As an expert in world Christianity, Dr. Padilla has contributed many articles and books, chapters about mission and evangelization, which are available through Biblioteca Digital Pitts. Dr. Wilmer Estrada-Carrasquillo is Associate Professor of Missions and Evangelism at Asbury Theological Seminary. Previously, he served as Director of the Center for Latino Studies in Cleveland, Tennessee. A former national youth and Christian education leader with the Iglesia de Dios Mission Board in Puerto Rico, he serves at his local church, Comunidad de Esperanza in Cleveland, Tennessee, and preaches and teaches in different events throughout the country. His academic work is also available through Biblioteca Digital Pitts. Join us as we engage in this conversation about cultural fluency in ministry and learning in the digital age.
I thought that was great. Okay. Sound this one coming up?
Yeah. 3, 2, 1.
Well, Ruth, thank you for making time with us to talk a little bit about the realities of theological education or Christian education and the connections between North American education and South American education. I know that you have been part of both as a student and now as a faculty/administrator. So I want to draw you into this first question more in a way to bring a testimony of your experience, and then we'll just keep going with the conversation. So having the lived experience of moving between the South and North in the area of theological education, could you mention some distinctives or characteristics that impacted you of each one?
Mm-hmm. Yes, well, thanks, Wilmer. It's great to be with you. So I think there's some commonality because as Latin background, Latin Americans, independent if we live in the South or the North, there are certain cultural values that we bring just because of who we are, ethnically, culturally, and so that need, that search for learning in community, for learning together, for exchanging with our peers and with our faculty, but just wanting to do this together and to weave together a kind of the real contextual challenges and the head knowledge. We don't want to just settle for things, conceptual abstractions, but we want to see it being embedded into life and the dailiness of it. So that's a commonality. I do think, however, that in the North, there's the particularly challenging reality of overstressed schedules, people working 2 and 3 jobs, and on top of that studying, and on top of that ministering in their local church. And so carving out time to engage deeply is a big challenge. And of course, that is true in the South somewhat, but there seems to be a little more space to breathe and to engage more deeply. And so I see that as a contrast, and it has to do more with the contextual challenges than with the cultural ones.
Yeah, I think that's so true. As one who comes from Puerto Rico to do theological education in the States as a student, I missed that communal aspect in many ways, which now as a faculty, I do a lot of small groups conversation and a lot of assignments with students hate, right? Because they just want the individual grade. They don't want to depend on no one else. But I think I think you mentioned something. I think it's part of our Christian identity is that the idea of doing something in community, though it's hard, there's a lot of fruit in it. There's a lot of things that we can take out of that. So thank you for highlighting that. So talking about the realities of the Latino community, there was assumed that we are multicultural, regardless of we all may speak Spanish or Portuguese, right? As faculty, as teachers, as facilitators, why is it important to foster this intercultural dialogue with our students in whatever space that we're teaching?
Yeah, so I think that we obviously, every single person comes with his or her culture, with values and modes of relating and modes of being, and such that are just naturally there as part of being embedded in a certain culture. The problem is that too often we're not critically aware of that, of how much our culture marks us. We just live it. It's the water we swim in. It's the air we breathe. And so we're not intentional. And then we're not by lacking that intentionality, we are not then able to bring the offerings, the gifts from that particular culture into the mix alongside others. And so I think a level of just self-reflection, inviting students into, hey, what are your cultural values? What is your cultural identity? Don't shy away from it. Bring the gifts into the mix. But that demands that kind of distancing and self-reflection and critical analysis to then be able to say, we're not just a sum of a variety of cultures, but we're going to engage interculturally. We're going to dialogue across our differences to enrich the learning for everyone, and not just the learning up in the head, but the living together in the world, so that we can undo some of the basic, very damaging stereotyping that is so prevalent in our society.
Yeah. One of the things that I've tried to do a very simple way to, I think, live out what you're saying is like, even at times when I begin with the devotion in class, I just ask different students, female, male, to read scripture out loud. And some of them get like, why are you asking us to read the same text 5 times, right? And they just missed the point. They missed the point that it was a gal reading, that it was a male reading, that there was a Gen Xer reading, or it was a boomer reading, and all of that brings some sort of nuance to the reality, and even scriptural versions that they use at times, right? So It is there are many ways that we can do this, because I think that can prepare people, specifically when we talk about theological education, that is going to be training people for ministry, to somehow develop some cultural awareness of the students for the ministry that they're going to do. So connecting that with this other question then is, how does this intercultural dialogue, fostering this kind of exchange, can help the church's mission in such a chaotic time, turbulent times that we're living right now?
Turbulent times they are. So I think one of the challenges is that there has been often the assumption that that theology is neutral, that it even and the lack of recognition that every theology is contextual. Every theology is contextual. It has been generated from particular social, political, historical contexts, and so there is a need for recognition of that fact, and then valuing what is generated from our own particular cultural matrix. And so if we're not willing to value that, we are unlikely to be able to live out mission in a holistic way, in a way that really engages with the context, because we'll be just repeating formulas generated by somebody else. And so let's value the particular read, the particular intuitions that our culture gives as we approach Scripture and engage then in mission. So there's this call to recognize, in this case, the vulnerability of people on the move, the precariousness of migrants, and some documented or not, of the reality of today, and how valuing our giftedness and accompanying one another in sustaining deep relationship is not marginal to our witness. It is crucial.
Yeah. So I'll put my cards on the table. When I it was during my PhD work that I finally heard the names René Padilla, Orlando Costas, someone Escobar, just to mention a few. As a Puerto Riqueño, I was like, Orlando Costas, I never heard of him. Yes. He's a fellow Puerto Rican, right? So, yes. Not even in my process. So I say this because there's a need for Latinos in the U.S. or Hispanics in the U.S. to know that there's literature, that there is a fountain of resources for theology and ministry in Latin America that we need to read, regardless that probably our contexts are different. Yes, but I found so much richness reading these hermanos y hermanas, right? So how can people like me, faculty, Latino faculty, or non-Latino faculty teaching in the U.S., why is it important for them to expand their resourcing, and how can they do that in order to reach what is being written or being produced in Latin America?
Oh, this is a crucial question. And, so much of that assumption I was talking about, theology being neutral. So we just read what we're given, and it tends to be Euro people or North American Anglos or whatever. And we don't recognize the incredible wealth of reflection, of theological articulation, of missional challenges issued by sisters and brothers that are actually closer to us as Latinos, because they are Latin American, and so that there are so many sources. I highly recommend looking. For example, there's a Bible commentary created by Latin Americans. Do you even know it? It's the Comentario Bíblico Contemporáneo, generated exclusively by Latin American, Portuguese and Spanish-speaking Latin American theologians and writers, and so the questions that are brought up in there are so much more relevant than some of the questions that other people have generated. So places like Ediciones Kairos, that's making available literature even online, some of it for free, but you can find books by these authors you mentioned, and I have no doubt, and out of my own experience teaching Latinos in the North, that it's just like a world opens up of depth, of the emphasis on learning together in community, so many things that are so much more kind of tuned into our identity as Latin Americans. And so, yes, the experience of a Latino in Chicago is different from one in Buenos Aires, but there's a lot of commonality, and you would benefit significantly. And I would challenge professors, faculty, to broaden the base of the resources they bring to students for that reason.
Yeah, so one of the things I do whenever I get to preach, I go to El Comentario Bíblico Contemporáneo. That's the one I start with. I don't start with any place else, right?
Love it.
Because
Love it.
usually we go to the big names written by Europeans, but I go that one, and then I just, sort out. I even read my Bible in Spanish. I don't read it in English, right? So that's the kind of way to do it. And I think that's something that we have to keep doing. So let me just ask this last question, because you're not only a faculty, you don't only teach, but you're an administrator. You have been connected to theological education at the higher level in terms of making decisions and trying to shape curriculums in ways that are more integral or holistic. So take this last time to make a last call invitation as an administrator to faculty like us, or maybe administrators are going to be listening to this. Like, what is your invitation as a Latina administrator in the theological world for people in the North that are listening to this conversation?
Yeah, I would. Let me just put a little model of what I think opportunities we have as administrators and faculty in education. There was a group of people in Argentina from very different disciplines: church history, theology, psychiatry, philosophy. They got together to say, what would nourish our church, the leaders, the people in the pew, not necessarily exclusively pastors, but the church at large, to nourish a more intentional presence in society as witnesses of God's reign and God's justice? What would help? And instead of going with the classic categories, Old Testament, New Testament, hermeneutics, homiletics, they said, let's organize our whole curriculum around life. Work, church, society, family. And so they organized the entire curriculum around life. And the Community of Interdisciplinary Theological Studies, FETI, has continued with that legacy since then. And why I'm not bringing this up to say everybody needs to study with FETI, because I know you're all in your own institutions, but it was the courage to break the mold and explore how to really effectively reach people where they itch. And so I would challenge people to think outside of the box about and ask the question, what will really capacitate, form, and strengthen the capacity of people for ministry in relation to the challenges in this turbulent time? Do I need to just fill people's minds with knowledge, or do I need to nourish communities that dare to build the bridges between the word and the world for faithful living in it? And what will contribute to that? So look for sources that are doing that are leaning into that bridging job between the word and the world for faithful gospel witness.
Wow, Ruth, even though we're boxed in these little boxes, I'm glad that you're expanding us to think outside the boxes. So thank you so much for this conversation. Thank you for taking the time of speaking from your heart and inviting us to think more broadly in the ways that theological education can serve not only in the U.S., but also Latin America. Thank you so much for your time.
My privilege. Thank you.
Biblioteca Digital Pitts es un proyecto colaborativo entre Pitts Theology Library y la Asociación para la Educación Teológica Hispana AEDS. Búsquenos en pitts.tl/BD. Este ha sido DeBorst Ortiz Rivera. Será hasta la próxima. Dios les bendiga.